Disturbing new statistics released by the Pentagon reveal that in the first 155 days of this year, 154 active-duty U.S. soldiers committed suicide. That is nearly one a day. As horrific as this number is, it is made even worse by the haunting realization that more soldiers have taken their lives in this year than lost them on the field of battle. The number of suicides represents an 18% increase over the same period last year. Here to help explain and understand these troubling statistics are Vote Vets co-founder and chairman John Saltz, who served 2 tours of duty in Iraq, and Dr. Stephen Xenakis, a retired brigadier general with 28 years of active duty experience and a founder of the Center for Translational Medicine. Thank you both so much for your time tonight. John, let me begin with you. Make sense of this. Why you've been there on the field of battle. What do you think explains this uptick, this surge, this horrifying set of data?
I was actually at a loss when I saw this article. We had done better in the last couple of years with suicides. We're seeing a lot more suicides, since 2006 forward, mostly because we're the type of combat. So, if you explain that,
what do you mean the type of combat?
Well, there's no place to hide in Iraq. So if you're on a base, last year I'm on a base, we got dumped 12 240 millimeter Iranian-made rockets. I mean, that's a huge caliber of ammunition. So if you think you're safe and you're not safe, it's a problem. You go on a convoy. My first convoy in Iraq's about as long as it took me to get shot at. So the type of combat that you're facing, you never actually know when it appears. The other issue is multiple tours. So the big question now is, how'd you only go to Iraq once? These things wear on the mind. Then there's the issue that you only have 1% serving. So when you come back and you go out to the bar and you meet some girls and they ask you if you killed somebody and your wife left you for another guy, and your kid relationship with your children isn't strong anymore because they have a stronger relationship with their mother or their father, for that matter, there's a huge adjustment to this.
Dr. Xenakis, all of the things that John just laid out are troubling, are difficult, that we need to deal with. But do they explain why this war is fundamentally different than what we faced in other wars? Vietnam, where, again, the reintegration back into civil society was very, very difficult for veterans. What do you make of this uptick in the trend?
I think that the uptick is itself an indicator of the incredible stress that the whole force has been under after 10 years of war. And as we've seen before, these problems come to light after the fighting stops, so that the Army and Marines, the military redeploys, they come back to garrison, and no longer in the kind of fighting frame of mind as they have been, and these problems just come out. And particularly now, when under the circumstances that Mr. Saltz explained, we're going to see, I think, in the next year, unfortunately, a lot more of this.
Do you think that people look at multiple tours, multiple years spent in Iraq or Afghanistan? Do you think that is one of the links, one of the causative factors, a predictor you can look at to try to intervene and stop this?
No, absolutely. And I think we need to recognize that most of these suicides and incidents occur in young people under 30. They've come in, they've spent 4 or 5, maybe more years. They've grown up in an environment of multiple deployments. And during that time, a lot of these other issues of how they have families and close relationships and what they do with their kids, their children, I mean, that's not been something that they've been able to learn about, and they've now got to adjust to it. So that's really hard for them.
Is the military responding appropriately? And it's perhaps what I'm about to do is a bit unfair, but there was one quote that was very jarring in the article in which the general in which you were quoted today from a Major General Petard, who said, and I've just got to quote this, he said, "I have now come to the conclusion that suicide is an absolutely selfish act. I'm personally fed up with soldiers who are choosing to take their own lives so that others can clean up their mess. Be an adult, act like an adult, deal with your real life problems like the rest of us." Certainly not a sense of empathy, sympathy, or understanding that this is a serious psychological problem where the military and our government need to invest resources, thinking in terms of how to address it. John, is this typical, or is the military doing what's right?
That's not typical. That's General Petard. He's the commander of the 1st Armored Division. He was a brigade commander for the 1st Infantry Division in Iraq prior to that. He was a company commander in the First Gulf War. He has a very good reputation. He said something completely stupid. Look, I can tell you, I work 2 sides of this fence. I work in politics. I'm also a member of the reserves. Look, there's nothing worse for your command than to have a suicide. I mean, we have classes on this. We have videos on this, everything. I mean, the general at the top is not close to the soldiers that have these problems. It's on, these NCOs, these younger officers. Nobody wants this. But the fact is that this is a product of the war. Okay, so you want to keep sending people to war all the time. You're never going to completely eradicate this issue. I mean, this is what this last thing says. To scare you, this report that we're seeing doesn't even talk about the National Guard and Reservists. Look, I came home 6 months ago. Do you see anybody around here who served in Iraq that I can go talk to? No. If you're on active duty, at least you have these peers who are in this relationship with you. I mean, Guard and Reservists, we can't command refer people for mental health problems. So the National Guard and Reserves, actually, we're going to see more suicides. And this study doesn't even take that into effect. But the military is aware of this. That's why our numbers are lower. It's just impossible to completely stop. The question is, how can we improve it? But General Petard does not represent, certainly, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and other military leaders.
Certainly, I didn't read that quote to suggest that that was typical of the response. Dr. Xenakis, General Xenakis, what do you see? You were at a very senior level in the military, an organization, parenthetically, which I've always thought stands for the very best in our nation. It is hierarchical. It is a meritocracy. It is everything we want to believe in. How is the organization responding to this crisis?
I don't think they've got a worked-out campaign plan. They understand it. It's described well. All the factors that you've mentioned are recognized. But to have a campaign plan and a strategy that's going to come at it, and particularly come at it in the next year as they go about reconstituting and resetting, is just not there. And understanding that the military, the Army, and the Marines are going to be even under more stress. I mean, they're going to be downsizing, and they've got already 20,000 people who are pending medical evaluations and medical retirements. Now, Mr. Soltz said something that is a very good insight. There's a gap. And understandably, there's a gap between the young soldier and the sergeant and the battalion commander, brigade commander, and the generals. There's a gap in mentality. It's a gap in age. It's a gap in experiences. And I think it is really important to recognize that these are young people, have very fluid lives, dynamic lives, a lot going on with them, and they're just struggling with incredible stresses that are added to and complicated by the multiple deployments.
Yep, no question. This is an issue we will continue to focus on. It is a tragedy and one that is unfortunately born out of the horrors of war. Retired Brigadier General Dr. Stephen Xenakis and Vote Vets co-founder John Soltz, thank you both so much for your insights on this very tough issue.
Thank you for inviting us.